Welcome to British Focus, your go-to channel for the latest political debates and breaking news from across the UK. If you're passionate about understanding the real issues shaping Britain today, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for daily updates.
That policy.
That is not the correct interpretation of the Convention of Law of
As
Sea
you use the
1982.
word interpretation,
Well,
so
that's
there
what-
are different
that's what lawyers-
interpretations.
Yes, well,
All right.
so we do it, and then the French can sue us. That's how it works,
All right.
actually.
To apply for asylum.
We've already done more than our bit. Over half a million
fine.
people,
All right.
asylum seekers in the last decade or so who've come to the UK.
But
We
that's
can't take everybody.
disproportionate.
No, hang on.
That's
so
less
if someone is
than almost
rejected,
every other EU.
One of the most pressing issues in the country right now is illegal immigration, a topic that sparks fierce debate across political lines. Different parties propose different solutions, but one thing is clear: Labour's approach is failing. The current government claims to be following international conventions, but in reality, their interpretation is flawed. While policies should be clear and effective, we see a chaotic system where the UK takes action, only for France to reassess and slow the process down. The facts speak for themselves. Over 500,000 asylum seekers have arrived in the UK in the past decade, and yet, instead of securing our borders, politicians continue to debate rather than act. In today's video, we'll break down a heated discussion where Richard Tice takes on Labour and the entire panel. Stay tuned.
Cases a month. That is the small. That
It's
is the,
clearly not a deterrent because 20,000 people have come since the Labour government won the election. And look, this is extraordinary. It's remarkable that in Germany it wasn't illegal to people smuggle to other nations outside the EU, but this will make no difference whatsoever. There is a silver bullet that will stop the boats. It's what we should have done under the previous government, but they didn't have the guts to do it. Legally, you've got to pick up and take back to France, which we're entitled to do under the United Nations 1982 Convention of the Law of Sea. And what's interesting is, I've been talking about this for over a year now. No lawyer, no government minister, no civil servant has said I'm wrong, and there's a reason for that, because I'm right.
Well,
And they're embarrassed.
that's
and
not
they're
true. I'll
and
come back
I
to
will
that in a
humiliate
moment. But Karen, on your point, on Richard's point, I should say, that you didn't have the guts to do what Richard Tice and Reform UK is suggesting, and that's pushbacks.
I think pushbacks was something, it's all very well Greece to Turkey, for example, who are quite clearly not close allies, but for the UK and France, close allies, to be pushing boats back is very antagonistic.
Let her finish.
And I think, Richard, simple answers to this is not the solution. This is a very, very complicated situation. We need to stop people feeling the need to leave their home countries in the first place.
Karen,
we need to work with those countries that they're transiting through. We need to work with those countries that are facilitating through whatever mechanism the illegal boats. I was calling 18 months ago for the EU to set up a boat register, for example, so that those boats, we could stop them before they ever got on the channel.
So pray tell me, why aren't the boats leaving and coming to us from Belgium? I'll tell you why, because the Belgian authorities pick up the boats themselves, which they're legally obliged to do under that same international treaty, and they take them back. But because France are failing in their international obligations, we've got to do the job for them. And the moment you do that, this whole thing stops. We know it works because it worked in Australia 11 years ago.
It was a very different situation, but sorry, go on, Karen. Hang on.
I fully support Belgium, and actually I've been working with Belgium MPs.
So Belgium can do it, the French can do it.
So that we can work closely with Belgium, because they're absolutely right that they are doing a fantastic job. But I do not think
So you're accepting the French are doing a bad job?
I don't think the answer is to vilify the French in this situation. The answer
we've
is
vilified
to
the French for 300 years or so.
But the answer is to work with our allies, work with our friends, and try and stop this problem, which is a global problem.
Can we legally return people in the way you are suggesting without permission and consent from France?
Yes, and legally, France...
we can't.
We can, Joe.
I'm sorry.
Legally, Joe, France has a legal obligation.
Well, that's different.
Under that same international treaty.
France has not consented, and this is according to the House of Commons. Hang on. Let me finish the sentence. France has not consented to the return of vehicles to its waters. It's given a negative response to any proposals of what you call pushbacks. Without the consent of the country you'd be pushing the boats back to, the UK cannot legally adopt
of the law, which both lead to profiteering by criminal gangs that circulates in other parts of the illicit economy, and the exploitation of incredibly vulnerable people. Nobody wants to see that, but we can't imagine that there is a simple solution or, in fact, a way to make the problem go away.
Do you support more safe routes opening?
Well, the thing about safe routes is actually we've got safe routes already.
Well, where are they?
750,000 people came into the year to June 23 legally under the visa system to the United Kingdom. We
Now,
would
hang
have
on,
safe
hang on. We're not
routes.
talking about the net migration. We're talking. Let's focus on safe routes, which we have had for Hong Kong, for Ukraine. We did have one for Syria. I don't quite know what state that is.
When someone is
on
rejected,
that,
but the point, we can't accept everybody.
no, I'm not asking that. Should there be more safe routes for people to apply for asylum?
We've already done more than our bit. Over half a million people, asylum seekers in the last decade or so, who come to the UK.
But
We
that's
can't take everybody.
disproportionate.
Hang on.
That's less
if someone
than
is
almost
rejected,
every other
so
EU
Polly, if someone
country
is rejected
proportionately.
under a safe route and they then come here illegally, what's your response?
I absolutely think that we should have enforcement. But I'm just
Well, that's
I'm
what we're trying to do
contesting,
now.
I'm
We're failing at
contesting
it.
your claim that we have done more than our bit. In fact, the cost of supporting refugees
about
in the UK
midway,
is
actually,
substantially less than many, many other countries, and particular countries within region, including very poor countries, who absorb huge quantities of cost and burden.
Right. Okay, let me just.
It's time to address the elephant in the room. Britain's immigration crisis is spiraling out of control, and yet, our politicians refuse to take meaningful action. Since Labour took office, 20,000 people have arrived illegally, proving beyond a doubt that their so-called deterrent policies are utterly ineffective. It's clear that this government lacks both the will and the courage to tackle illegal immigration head-on. Let's be honest, this problem isn't new, and it isn't unique to Britain. But what is unique is how weak and ineffective our leaders have been in handling it. Just look at Germany. Not long ago, it wasn't even illegal to smuggle people into other non-EU countries. If that doesn't expose the absolute failure of European immigration policies, I don't know what does. Now, here's where Richard Tice makes an important point, one that the mainstream political class is too spineless to accept. There is a legal, effective solution to stop the boats immediately. The UK has every right, under the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, to intercept these illegal crossings and return migrants to France. It's not just an option, it's a right that our government refuses to exercise. And ask yourself this: if the British government actually wanted to stop these crossings, why haven't they done it already? Tice has been advocating this solution for over a year, and what's interesting is that not a single lawyer, government minister, or civil servant has been able to prove him wrong. Why? Because he's right. They know he's right. But instead of admitting it, they dodge, they deflect, they pretend that stopping illegal immigration is too complex. It isn't. It just requires leadership, something this government lacks entirely. And of course, as always, when someone presents a clear and practical solution, the establishment rushes to shut it down. During a recent debate, Karen, one of the panelists, dismissed Tice's plan, calling it unrealistic and overly simplistic. She argued that the real solution lies in tackling the root causes: poverty, conflict, trafficking networks. The usual nonsense we've been hearing for years. But let's break that down for a moment. Do you think these migrants are coming to Britain because of some grand international crisis? No. They're coming because they know they won't be turned away. They know that once they step foot on British soil, the system will bend over backwards to accommodate them. If the real issue was the root causes, then why aren't they flooding into Spain, Portugal, or Belgium in the same numbers? It's simple. Britain is an easy target. Tice pointed this out brilliantly, using Belgium as an example. Belgium doesn't have this problem because they enforce their laws. When a migrant boat tries to reach Belgian waters, their authorities intercept it and send it back. They do this because they are legally obliged to under international law. Meanwhile, France, our so-called ally, flat out refuses to do the same. And what does our government do? Nothing. Instead of demanding that France upholds its international obligations, we continue to pour millions into French border control efforts that clearly aren't working. And let's talk about the Australian model, something Tice rightly referenced. Australia faced an almost identical crisis 11 years ago. What did they do? They intercepted boats, turned them around, and stopped illegal immigration overnight. It worked. Yet, when this strategy is suggested for Britain, we're told it's impossible. But why? Why is Belgium able to enforce the law? Why was Australia able to enforce the law? And yet Britain, one of the most powerful nations in the world, apparently can't? It's not a question of legality. It's a question of political will. And under Labour, there simply isn't any. Now, let's shift the focus for a moment. Some people argue that we need more safe routes for asylum seekers. Tice tackled this claim head-on, and once again, the numbers prove him right. The UK already has safe routes. In the last year alone, over 340,000 people entered legally under visa schemes. We have dedicated programs for Hong Kongers, Ukrainians, and Syrians. The idea that we are some cruel, unwelcoming country is a complete lie. But here's where it gets even more absurd. If someone applies for asylum through a safe route and is rejected, they can't just decide to come illegally anyway. That's not how laws work. And yet, Labour and their allies in the media pretend that every single migrant arriving by boat is a genuine refugee. We know that's not true. A huge percentage are economic migrants, and many are coming from countries that are not at war. But the biggest question remains: why does the UK have to carry this burden alone? Our country is smaller than France, Germany, and many other European nations, yet we take in a disproportionate number of asylum seekers. Other countries, including poorer nations, are handling this issue far better than we are. But instead of holding our leaders accountable, the media and the left push the narrative that we need to do even more. At what point do we say enough is enough? The British people have been incredibly tolerant and patient, but patience is running out. We cannot accept limitless immigration. We cannot allow our borders to be treated as a joke. And let's not forget the cost. The British taxpayer is footing the bill for this crisis, and the numbers are staggering. Billions of pounds are being spent on housing, healthcare, and social benefits for migrants who should not even be here. Meanwhile, our own citizens are struggling with the cost of living, high energy prices, and an NHS that is stretched to its limits. Yet, if you dare to point this out, you're labelled far-right or xenophobic. This is the classic tactic used by the left to silence opposition. But facts don't care about labels. The fact is that our immigration system is broken, and our leaders refuse to fix it. So, here's the bottom line: Richard Tice is right. We have the legal authority to stop the boats. We have the ability to enforce our borders. But our government lacks the political will. And that's why this crisis continues. If we really care about solving this problem, we need to stop making excuses. We need to stop pretending that this is some kind of unsolvable global dilemma. It's not. It's a choice. A choice between standing up for Britain or letting our country be overrun by a system that rewards lawlessness. What do you think? Are we doing enough? Should Britain take a stronger stance? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to British Focus for more hard-hitting discussions on the issues that matter most.